One of the more interesting, controversial parts of this Sephardic history is Sabbatianism. The Jews always were lured to messiahs, essentially false messiahs. So after the Spanish expulsion, there was a lot of pressure on the Jews. There was a lot of optimism. There was a lot of despair. You had the Chmelnytsky riots in Eastern Europe in 1648. There were all sorts of signs in these mystic communities. The communities weren't only rabbinic, they were Kabbalistic communities, that this is the end of days. There's going to be some redemption. There's going to be some messianic era. So there were, before Shabtai Tzvi, there was Shlomo Molcho and David Reuveni, and these eccentric figures, they razzled the populations. And of course, it was a threat. It was a threat for rabbinic Judaism. So Shabtai Tzvi wasn't just a messiah for the area or Sephardic Jews. In fact, it was a tremor for the whole Jewish world. The idea is the Messiah is going to come, and everyone's going to go to Israel, and we're going to rebuild the temple, and it's all going to be supernatural. But what happened was, you had this charismatic, very eclectic figure, Shabtai Tzvi. We think he was actually born in Patras, might have been from an Ashkenazic family, actually, and he wandered around. He lived in Izmir for a while. He went to yeshiva in Gaza. He was persuaded by someone named Nathan Ashkenazi in the yeshiva in Gaza that he was the Messiah. And there are a lot of different narratives. I claim that he was promoted and lured to be the Messiah through a following in Jerusalem. But so what happened was, in Salonika, Shabtai Tzvi would go from community to community and attract followers. In Salonika, in the Mograbi, the synagogue of Jews from North Africa, he had 3,000 followers. And so he created a tremendous frenzy and a tremendous abrogation for Jewish law. So in this synagogue, for example, on Tisha B'Av, which you're supposed to mourn the temple, he made it a festivity and canceled the fast day. He had about 5 different wives. He had problems of, being sexually potent. He got divorced. He married daughters of his followers, and he had a ceremony where he married a Torah scroll. We don't actually know about any descendants he had, and it's possibly had maybe 1 or 2, but we don't know anyone who carried on this legacy in terms of a blood relative. But so eventually in 1666 he's declared the Messiah in Izmir, and that's a threat to the Ottoman Empire. So the Sultan orders him to come to the capital and say, if you're the Messiah, you have to make a miracle, So Shabtai Tzvi, of course, couldn't make a miracle, and the Sultan said, I give you 2 options. Either I'll execute you, or you have to convert to Islam. So he converted to Islam, and he was jailed in a series of places in Turkey, and then he was exiled to what is today Montenegro. He had a tremendous following. This was a threat to rabbinic Judaism, to Judaism. In Salonika, boys who were 11 married girls who were 9. People sold everything, and they're waiting at the port to go to Eretz Yisrael, and nothing happened. They lost their whole livelihood and possessions. And the Salonican and Sephardic Jewry was in a state of decline for 200 years, in a state of mediocrity. There were 3 different groups of followers of Shabtai Tzvi who, after he converted, in the aftermath, in the decades after, they converted to Islam, but they remained Jewish and Sephardic and Ladino speakers on the inside, and mystics. Now, there are 3 types of Sabbatians. I'll read to you briefly. The Izmirlis were the followers from Izmir, and those who had converted to Islam with Shabtai Tzvi. The Jacobis, those that believed in Yaakov Querido formerly Pilasoph, whose last name means beloved or endeared, and was the brother of the second wife of Shabtai Tzvi, and that he received the spirit of Shabtai Tzvi. The third group were the Yacobis, who were a very secret group, and even in Istanbul today we hardly know anything about them. But they were named after Yaakov Karido, who also had a prophetic status. So one of these groups, which I think was the Karakash, which was probably the most simple in terms of socio-economic status, but also produced journalists and politicians in Turkey much later, on the birth of Shabtai Tzvi, at the equinox, when the moon is at the fullest and highest point at the end of the spring, that sect had wife swamping in the evening in a festivity, and the kids born of those illegitimate unions were considered the disciples of Shabtai Tzvi. Because of that, the rabbis feared that all the Sabbatians were bastards, were mamzerim. So the three groups didn't marry amongst themselves, but the rabbis made a general decision about the Shabtayim. Now, in 1922, 1923, there was a population exchange between Greece and Turkey. It didn't really make sense, but all those who were Greeks, who were Greek Orthodox, who spoke Greek, who lived in Asia Minor, which became Turkey, were sent to Greece, and those who were Turkish, Ottoman Turkish-speaking Turkish Muslims who lived in Greece, in the Greek peninsula, were sent to live in Turkey. So the Dunmei didn't want to go, but the rabbi said, "You're not Jewish." So the rabbi said, because of this problem of the illegitimate marriages, you're Muslim. So they relocated to Turkey. There were 100,000 people in 3 sects. They had an active 2-3 generations of Sabbatian secret life. And today they're all watered down, and we only know the remnants. Of these Jacobis, we don't know, they're very secluded. We don't know anything about them. But in Salonika, all 3 groups lived in various neighborhoods, not together with the Jews, in the Turkish sections. And Ataturk was a descendant of Shabtai Tzvi. He went to school in the building which is the Turkish consul. He was about a 4th Sabbatian. And they became Turkish secularists, and Ataturk was the founder of the modern republic, his influence has waned tremendously to the fundamentalists. But with him, he brought in many Dunmei to head the army and the political regime in Turkey. Many people who headed Turkey in various positions, even foreign ministers, were Dunmei.